One of the commonest surgeries done for chronic suppurative otitis media is tympanoplasty. And as the name suggests, it is the plastic repair of tympanum or the middle ear. And this tympanoplasty is very important for your examination and also in your clinical practice. So today I will explain tympanoplasty under the headings of definition, physiological principles, indication, contraindication, prerequisites and the types. And I will deal about each procedure of each type of tympanoplasty along with this complication in a coming couple of classes. So this tympanoplasty is a surgical procedure, isn't it? There is no doubt in that. What is the procedure done there? We are elevating the tympanomeatal flap, or otherwise we are looking into the middle ear and removing any disease present in the middle ear and reconstructing the hearing apparatus. This is a basic function doing there. So it is a surgical procedure in which we are eradicating the disease. Okay, so eradicating the disease from the middle ear. Okay, along with that, reconstructing the hearing apparatus. Okay. So after the surgery, the patient should have a near normal hearing apparatus. And it is not a must that tympanoplasty should always include tympanic membrane grafting. So it can be with or without tympanic membrane repair. Okay. And without mastoid exploration. So that is why we always tell us tympanoplasty with the cortical mastoidectomy or tympanoplasty with mastoid exploration, like that. Okay. So this is the definition of tympanoplasty. It is a surgical procedure in which we are eradicating the disease from the middle ear with the reconstruction of hearing mechanism along with or without tympanic membrane grafting and without mastoid exploration. So this is a definition. Thorough understanding of the physiology of hearing is important to know the basics and the principles and the procedure of this tympanoplasty. I have explained the physiology of hearing in an earlier class. So please see that and study that before start learning tympanoplasty. Basically, when the sound vibrations come, it will touch on the tympanic membrane. It will cause vibrations of the tympanic membrane, and this is transmitted through the ossicular chain, the footplate of stapes, then also the oval window. And here is the perilymph area and endolymph, and this is a round window. And this bony cochlea is a fixed space. So inside that, the fluid system is also fixed amount. It cannot be dilated or it cannot be compressed. So when there is a positive pressure at the oval window, what happens is that this will causes vibrations, and it will cause a passive outward movement of the round window. And this movement of the fluid system causes movement of the basement membrane and formation of or production of an endocochlear potential. And you know that this is up to this is the air medium, and from inside the cochlea, the perilymph and the endolymph is the fluid. So if you go from an air to fluid medium, the resistance of the fluid is more, isn't it? I have already told in the physiology of hearing, you cannot run in underwater as you run in air, because the resistance or the impedance of the fluid is very high. In order to match this impedance, our body has got some physiological properties, and that is the sound pressure transformer ratio. Sound pressure transformer mechanism. Okay. The sound pressure transformer ratio is the product of hydraulic ratio into ossicular ratio or liver ratio. Okay. Don't get confused. All these are described in physiology of hearing. I'll just explain the basics. So the sound pressure transformer ratio is a product of hydraulic ratio. That is the ratio of effective vibrating area of the tympanic membrane to that of the oval window, which is 17:1. And the liver ratio is the ratio of long process of incus to that of handle of Wallace, and that is 1.3:1. So the sound pressure transformer ratio is the product of this 17 into 1.3, and that is 22. Okay, so the pressure is increased to 22 times when it reaches the oval window. That is one thing, that sound pressure. Another important structure which help in a normal hearing is this round window, which act as a relief window for movement of fluid within the bony cochlea. Okay, so and this round window is always protected by this tympanic membrane, so that there is a damping of the sound reaching, and also there is a phase lag. When the oval window moves in an active fashion, this round window moves in a passive direction. Okay, so when there is a inward direction of the oval window, there will be an outward movement at the round window, so that this movement of the fluid system happens. Think of a scenario when there is a large perforation of the tympanic membrane. Okay, this much is a perforation, and along with that there is interruption of the ossicular chain also. There is a perforation, and along with that there is an interruption of the ossicular chain. Then the total hearing loss will be around 40 to 50 dB. Okay. There will be some movement of the fluid system, because this vibrations will come and causes a minimal movement of this round window and oval window. More than oval window, it causes vibrations of the round window. But think of a situation in which this tympanic membrane is intact and there is ossicular discontinuity. In that case, you will get 60 to 65 dB hearing loss. It will be more. If the tympanic membrane is intact and the ossicular system is discontinued, there is an ossicular discontinuation, the hearing loss will be more. Why? Because behind an intact tympanic membrane, there is no movement at the oval window or no movement at the round window. So this part will be standing still. Okay, so this hearing loss will be more in that case. That is why I told you the tympanoplasty does not include tympanic membrane grafting always. What about the indications? So tympanoplasty is plastic repair of middle ear. It includes both tympanic membrane and middle ear cavity, isn't it? So the indication should include one which causes diseases in the tympanic membrane, maybe a retraction pocket or maybe a perforation. Okay, so what will be the indications? One, chronic suppurative otitis media. Any confusion there? Chronic suppurative otitis media, in which there is disease in the tympanic membrane and also disease in the middle ear. So it includes both TTD and AAD, tubotympanic disease and aticoandral disease. The newer classification is mucosal disease and squamous disease, isn't it? In both conditions, we can do tympanoplasty. If there is cholesteatoma, we have to remove the cholesteatoma, and if needed, go for a mastoid exploration. So tympanoplasty with or without a mastoid exploration. Okay. So that is one indication. And second, what is the other condition which causes disease or trauma to the or perforations of tympanic membrane? That is trauma. Trauma will cause damage to tympanic membrane and also ossicular discontinuity. So trauma to TM and ossicles. Then third, tympanosclerosis, chalky white patch deposition in the tympanic membrane, which again causes a conductive hearing loss. So tympanosclerosis, then deep retraction pockets. Definitely it is an indication for tympanoplasty. Congenital conditions. One is a congenital cholesteatoma, or there is congenital fixation of the ossicle, especially on the head of malleus. Okay. So congenital fixity of the ossicle, commonest one is fixation of the head of malleus, or there is congenital cholesteatoma. Okay, so these are the common indications for tympanoplasty. CSOM, trauma, tympanosclerosis, deep retraction pocket, and congenital cholesteatoma or congenital ossicular discontinuity or ossicular fixity. Then contraindications. Again, we can divide the contraindication into absolute contraindication and relative contraindication. Okay. In all cases, in all surgery, active infection is a contraindication, but it is not an absolute contraindication. Okay, because if there is an active infection, you can treat that active infection, and when the infection is subsided, you can go for surgery again. So, active infection is under relative contraindication. And what about the absolute contraindication? One is malignancies of the outer and the middle ear. In that case, the eradication of disease is the most important one. Reconstruction, we are not doing the reconstruction of the hearing apparatus in malignancy. So, malignancy is a absolute contraindication. Malignancy of the outer as well as the middle ear. Okay. And second, of the active infection, the life-threatening Pseudomonas infection, especially in a diabetic patient, is an absolute contraindication. All other active infections are related. Life-threatening Pseudomonas in diabetic patient. Okay. And the intracranial complications of chronic suppurative otitis media. It is an absolute contraindication. Why? Because in intracranial complication, we have to eradicate the disease. That is a priority rather than reconstruction of the hearing mechanism. So, this reconstruction can be done as a second stage. So, that is not included under tympanoplasty. Intracranial complication of CSOM. So, these three are the absolute contraindications. Malignancy of the outer and the middle ear, Pseudomonas infection and intracranial complications are taken as a relative contraindication. Active infection, especially there is an acute exacerbation of chronic suppurative otitis media, then it is a relative contraindication. We have to treat that acute exacerbation and then can plan tympanoplasty later. Then another one, non-functioning of the eustachian tube. That also comes along with the prerequisites, because in a middle ear, if we want to maintain a normal hearing mechanism or a near normal hearing mechanism, this adequate air should be there in the middle ear. And if the eustachian tube is not at all functioning, and it becomes a contraindication. So first treat the cause of this non-functioning of the eustachian tube and then go for tympanoplasty. Then only hearing ear. Always there should be a caution. It's better to go for alternative procedures like wearing a hearing aid. Then chronic cough, especially in smokers and also in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD) patients. The results of tympanoplasty will be less compared to normal patients, and it is better to withhold tympanoplasty up to 10 years of age. Definitely, if there is a cholesteatoma or bilateral perforations of the tympanic membrane, you have to go for tympanoplasty earlier. Otherwise, if it is not a cholesteatoma or if there is no tympanic membrane, bilateral tympanic membrane perforation, better you hold till the 10 years of age, as evidence shows that the tympanoplasty done under 10 years of age, the results are comparatively less. Okay. Of the prerequisites that you can tell looking at this picture. The aim of surgery is eradication of disease and reconstruction of the hearing apparatus so that the patient will have a normal or a near normal hearing. For a normal functioning of the ossicles and the movement of the tympanic membrane and the oval window and the round window, this middle ear should have what? Should contain adequate air, and the volume of the tympanic cavity or the middle ear cleft altogether is 6 cc. 6 cc air should be there, and this 6 cc should come through this, isn't it? What is this? This is a eustachian tube. So number one prerequisite, what is that? This eustachian tube should be functioning normally. Okay, so normal functioning eustachian tube, number one. Number two, the eustachian tube is functioning, but there is an obstruction somewhere. What are the common causes of obstruction? A deviated nasal septum, or acute infections or recurrent infections of the nose, nasopharynx and paranasal sinus, and adenoid hypertrophy. All these will cause an obstruction of the tympanic membrane, obstruction of the eustachian tube. So all predisposing factors like a deviated nasal septum or sinusitis, chronic sinusitis or adenoid hypertrophy, all allergic rhinitis, all these should be treated or corrected. Okay, so number two is disease of the nose and also PNS. Okay, all these should be corrected. That is number two. So, about the eustachian tube, normal eustachian tube function and the patent eustachian tube, all predisposing factors should be corrected. That is two. Then, you have corrected everything, but if the sensory neural hearing component or the cochlear part is not functioning properly, will the patient get a normal hearing? Only his conductive component is corrected. He is having a sensory neural hearing loss. No way. So, the third prerequisite is adequate cochlear reserve, or in other words, there should not be any sensory neural hearing loss. So, this part, third, cochlear reserve, adequate. And the fourth one is the ear should be dry for minimum of 4 to 6 weeks to get better results, except cholesteatoma. And if there is a cholesteatoma, this can be combined with a mastoid exploration. Okay, so there are 4 prerequisites for tympanoplasty, that is normal functioning of eustachian tube, predisposing factors corrected, adequate cochlear reserve, and also ear should be dry for minimum of 4 to 6 weeks. Types of tympanoplasty, the widely accepted classification is by Woolstein, and he divided tympanoplasty into 5 types. According to them, the type A. Okay, it is actually there is a defect is in the tympanic membrane. If there is a tympanic membrane perforation. Okay. So we have to reconstruct this tympanic membrane perforation. But along with that, we are elevating the tympanomeatal flap and looking into the middle ear. But the middle ear is normal. So just reconstruction of the tympanic membrane perforation is type A. Otherwise we can tell that it is myringoplasty. Okay, type 1 tympanoplasty is repair of tympanic membrane, and also along with that inspection of the middle ear also. So type A is repair of TM. TM perforation. And in type B, there is defect in the handle of malleus. Type B, there is ossicular defect. According to Woolstein, there is defect in the or erosion in the handle of malleus. So the graft is, tympanic membrane graft is kept either on the malleus or on the long prosophagus. Okay, so that is otherwise called ossiculoplasty. And Austin classified this type B tympanoplasty into again 7 grades that I will explain along with the procedure of ossiculoplasty. Okay. So then type C is, in type C there is only one ossicle, that is stapes, and the normal stapes superstructure and a mobile foot plate. Okay. So in birds there is only one ossicle, and that is a columella. So here also we call it as a columella effect, okay, or myringostepidiopexy. We keep the tympanομembrane grafting over the stapes superstructure, and this is a graft, and here you can see our middle ear is made very much shallow. So production of a shallow middle ear space, and the graft is kept over the stapes superstructure. So that is myringostepidiopexy. Myringus means tympanομembrane, stapes, you know that stapes, our stapes. So myringostepidiopexy. Okay. C. Myringostepidiopexy, or otherwise called the columella effect, because of the single ear ossicle in birds. It's columella effect also, single one. Okay. And D, the fourth one, this even this superstructure is absent. Only foot plate is present, and this foot plate is mobile also. So in type D, the stapes foot plate is mobile and absent superstructure. So we have to protect the round window, isn't it? So it is called, this graft is kept over the round window. So a very shallow middle ear with the protection of the round window, and that is called round window baffling. Okay, what is the meaning of baffling? Is protection. So here we are doing a round window protection. Okay. And in E, the fifth type, stapes superstructure present, but foot plate is fixed. Here the foot plate is fixed. So actually this oval window is not working because the stapes superstructure is fixed. So we have to make some arrangement to cause a movement of the cochlear fluids. So what we have to do? What is this here? Here comes our horizontal semicircular canal. So we have to make a fenestra over the horizontal semicircular canal, so that there will be some movement of the fluid system, cochlear fluid system. So this a fenestra is made, and it is covered with a skin graft, and also a tympanomembrane graft is kept covering both oval window as well as a round window, and a fenestra is made over the stapedial, a fenestra is made over the horizontal semicircular canal. Okay, so when the air comes, it will cause some movement of the cochlear fluid system, right? So that is fenestration, horizontal semicircular canal fenestra. Fenestration of semicircular, horizontal semicircular canal. So these are the 5 types as described by Woolstein. So type A is simple repair of tympanomembrane. Type B is ossiculoplasty, again divided into so many types by Austin. And type C is myringostepidiopexy. Type D is round window baffling, and E is fenestration of the horizontal semicircular canal. Of these 5 types, the most commonly used or commonly done tympanoplasty is type 3 tympanoplasty or a myringostepidiopexy, especially along with the canal wall down mastoid exploration. That is usually asked as MCQ. It is type 3 tympanoplasty which is most commonly done. In the past, the success of tympanoplasty was highlighted in terms of hearing improvement only. But recently, the success is evaluated or reported under 4 headings. One is hearing improvement definitely, and the second one is removal of the pathology. Third, anatomical status, and the fourth is postoperative complication. And fourth is in scoring pattern is developed, and that is middle ear risk index, MERI. And this reporting protocol was developed by Cartouche et al. This is for the postgraduates. Undergraduates, there is no need to go in such detail, and definitely if you want to get 100% marks, you can. Otherwise, you just study the types of tympanoplasty, that is enough. But the reporting protocol is according to middle ear risk index. It is actually a numerical scoring from 0 to 12, that is from 0 to severe pathology. So before going to the procedure, the most important thing is a preoperative evaluation and planning. That is very important. And preoperative tympanoplasty planning includes, the first one is a detailed history taking, present and also the history of past illness, including past surgeries done or any treatment taken in the past. That is important. So a detailed history, then examination of the ear and also head and neck. Okay. And in the ear, the tuning fork test is very important. Do a tuning fork and document that. And examination under microscope is also important, using an auto microscope. Do you know what is the focal length of objective lens used in microscope for the ear? That is usually asked in MCQs and also in Viva it can be asked. It is 200 mm. For ear it is 200, for nose it is 300, and for larynx it is 400. So 200, 300 and 400, that you should remember. When you examine the ear, if you find even a speck of wax in the external auditory canal, that has to be cleaned and a complete picture of the tympanic membrane has to be documented. And if there is discharge from the ear, as of now I already told, evidence shows it is not an absolute contraindication, it is only a relative contraindication. If there is discharge from the ear, it has to be treated with antibiotics, and if it is chronically discharging, you have to, and if especially if there is Pseudomonas, 1.5% acetic acid irrigation has to be given. So ask the patient to get a 1 ounce rubber syringe and ask him to instill this acetic acid into the ear twice or thrice a day. That is, affected ear has to be kept low and ask the patient to irrigate. If it is a right ear, it has to be kept low and ask the patient to irrigate with 1.5% acetic acid using a 1 ounce rubber syringe. And after irrigation, the ear should be made dry, and if needed, antibiotic ear drops has to be instilled. That has to be done in an ear up position. And once you are cleaning, it has to be low, and if putting antibiotic drops, it has to be high, and also give a tragal pressure after putting the ear drops so that it will go into the middle ear. That has to be instructed to the patient. So examination under microscope, and after that comes the hearing test of hearing, Pearson audiogram plus speech discrimination score. That is important. Hearing assessment include Pearson audiogram and speech discrimination score. And if you are planning for a reconstructive procedure, it is always better to go for a high resolution CT scan of the temporal bone with the 2 mm cuts. High resolution CT scan of the temporal bone with 2 mm cuts in axial and coronal plane. That is also important, especially for reconstructive procedures, and also in all cases of revision surgeries and in presence of cholesteatoma. This has to be done, and all these prerequisites should be evaluated, and it should be there And also another important is the informed consent. This has to be written in bold. Informed consent, inform the patient of what you are going to do, what are the types of procedures you are going to do, and what are the possible outcomes expected, and what are the possible complications that can happen, and also the details of alternative procedures or alternative treatment facilities available. All this has to be written and signed by the patient in presence of witness. That is very much important, especially there is high chance of medical legal cases. Okay. So all this to be done in the preoperative planning, and then comes the procedures. Before going to the procedures, I will explain the approaches used for ear surgery and the type of incisions and also the general principles of surgery.